Big news for anyone who loves the history of D-Day. Matt McLachlan Battlefield Tours has just launched a brand new tour that visits the D-Day beaches and lots of other sites in rural France, and all from the comfort of a luxurious cruise on the Seine River. Now, we ran this tour in 2024 and it was a huge success. It sold out in a matter of weeks. So now we've rolled it out again for 2025. But this time, there'll be 3 departures in June, July and September, giving you 3 times the opportunity to join us. The cruise is on board the luxurious Amadeus Diamond and begins and ends in Paris. Over 8 days, you'll enjoy the history, scenery and culture of the beautiful Seine River. But as an exclusive offering just for our passengers, you'll enjoy 2 full days touring the D-Day landing beaches in both the US and British sectors, plus daily seminars on board the ship that unpack the history of D-Day. And like all our tours, you'll be hosted by one of our expert historians who'll bring the story of D-Day to life. And if you've been on one of our tours before, you'll know that our historians really are the best there is. This is an exclusive cruise and places are extremely limited. Visit battlefields.com.au to book your place today.
Did you know 1 in 2 women wear the wrong foundation? Matching foundation is hard, but Il Maquillage makes it easy. Take the Power Match quiz to find a perfect match in seconds, customized to your unique skin tone, undertone, and coverage needs. With 600,000 5-star reviews, Woke Up Like This is our best-selling foundation for a reason. Available in 50 shades of weightless natural coverage. And with Try Before You Buy, you can try your full size at home for 14 days. Just pay shipping. Take the quiz at ilmaquillage.com/quiz. That's ILMAKIAGE.com/quiz.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous 2-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
A Living History production.
I'm Peter Hart.
And I'm Gary Bain.
And together we're Pete and Gary's Military History
Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the podcast. I'm Peter Hart, and today, for a special change, this will startle our regular listeners. For a very special treat, something that you all look forward to, I've got Gary Bain.
Hello, Pete. What's that stain on the carpet?
That's where I spilt the coffee. We're not mentioning that on the 1 in a million chance that Polly should listen to this.
Oh, right. That's a really bad stain, that
It is pretty bad stain, that. It's sort of multifaceted. Well, thanks to Polly podcast. And we'd like to mention our friend Old Grey what?
Old Grey Horror.
Yeah. He's done an album all about the Great War. It's called The Tower. Dun, dun, dun. Look it up on Spotify and perhaps buy a copy of him. It's always good to hear from our chums on social media, and he's been very supportive, hasn't he, Mr. Horror?
He has been very supportive.
You looked up his real name, didn't you?
No, he emailed me. I can't remember what it is, though.
So
let's just spoil everything you've done.
Oh, right. Well, what we do today? Well, it's just purely capitalism today, isn't it?
It's laugh or cry.
We're abandoning our socialist principles and we're going for the throat, aren't we?
It's yet another attempt to try and persuade the listeners to buy our book.
Bastards.
Laugh or Cry.
Well, we have sold 3 or 4 copies.
We have. It is available still at an exorbitant price on Amazon.
Yeah, I thought they'd have remaindered it by now. Our whole business model, dear listener, was based on it being remaindered after 3 weeks. We'd buy 1,000 of them for £1 each and flog them to you lot for a tenner. Well, it's not worked out like that, has it, Gary?
No. Still, let's get on with the podcast, otherwise people will have all turned off by now.
Well, what's the actual title of the podcast?
Laugh or Cry, Advance to Victory, 1918.
So it's sort of flogging a dead horse, is it?
Well, this is bringing everything together naturally to a conclusion.
Right. Well, let's look at the situation in 1918. There's a couple of things happened. What would one of them be? What happened at the back end of 17 that might have impacted on the war, can you think?
Oh, you're talking about the collapse of the Russians, presumably.
Yeah, and what did that mean?
Well, it meant that the Germans could launch a series of stunning attacks on the Western Front in the spring offensives.
Ooh. And,
Oh, what was that? Ding bong.
that was Alexa, obviously enjoying this. It's sort of the Germans' their last chance of winning the war before something else happens. What's that, Gary? We've been through this before.
The arrival of the Naffy wagon.
No, the arrival of the massed hordes of Americans who had joined the Allies in April 1917, but they wouldn't be able to mobilise significant numbers of troops until the summer of 1918. So there's this gap. There's this little teeny-weeny gap.
And the logistics, of course. They needed the equipment. They used French equipment, British equipment. They were not equipped for the war at that time.
But they would be in the summer of 18. So, yeah, this is the Germans' last chance, if it was a chance, but it was certainly...
So it must have been a huge secret what was going on.
Oh, well, not really. Everybody knew what was happening.
Well, the British certainly knew they were going to attack, didn't they?
And this is, I mean, one of your favourite plays, because you're a sentimental old toodly. What's one of your favourite plays that brilliantly summarise all of this? What it was like for the British in their lines on the Somme, where they'd worked out the attack would be, and what's your favourite play?
Well, I'm assuming you mean Journey's End by R.C. Sheriff, which we'd gone to see in Ypres, not you and I, but myself and Janet and our good friend James Thompson, who'll never hear this, and we went to see.
And Paul didn't Paul go?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I think Paul did go.
Lovely Paul Hildyard. It's the film. Well, it's a film. It's a book. It's everything. It's R.C. Sheriff's masterpiece, Journey's End. Anyway, they wait in their trenches, as so brilliantly depicted in that play. But not everybody takes it entirely seriously, do they?
No, and this is Sergeant Oliver Bailey of the 1st 13th London Regiment. Who are they? The Kensington Battalion.
I knew that.
And you're going to tell us what he says.
The following situation report is quoted. It was sent in Morse in the usual manner to battalion headquarters by Captain F.W. Heath, MC, commanding C Company, where it caused much amusement. Needless to say, it was not forwarded officially to brigade. C Company situation report, 9th of the 2nd, 1918. There is nothing I can tell you that you really do not know, except we are on the ridge and Fritz is down below. When's old Fritz coming over? Does the General really know? The Colonel seems to think so. The Captain tells us no. When's someone going to tell us we can stand to as before? An hour at dawn and one at dusk. God blimey, who wants more? Because they're on the permanent qui-vive, as you often say in French.
Now, when the Germans struck, those in the front lines were killed or rendered almost helpless by the power of the bombardment. And this is what Captain Sparks of the 1st 14th London Regiment, that's the London Scottish, so he'll have a London accent, and this is what he says. I am faced with this position. I have collected all bombs and small arms ammunition from casualties. Everyone has been used. I am faced with 3 alternatives. A, to stay here with such of my men as are alive and be killed. B, to surrender to the enemy. C, to withdraw such of my men as I can. Either of these first 2 alternatives is distasteful to me. I propose to adopt the latter.
Very sensible. He's going to withdraw and live to fight another day. That's what we've talked about this a lot. How there needs to be maturity. Yeah. So now, did they all get away?
No, many were surrounded and taken prisoner. The shattered remnants fell back as best they could, really. Now, as some of the infantry retreated, they had practical considerations in mind. The abandoned stores and canteens that they passed en route were a lure many could not resist. And this is 2nd Lieutenant Frank Warren of the 17th King's Royal Rifle Corps.
Here we see the British Tommy at his irrepressible best. Tired and worn, he pauses for a rest. Some bright spirit lights upon a quartermaster's store, filled with all manner of change of raiment. He means clothes, doesn't he?
He does.
Very posh. Lo, the Bosch are but 2,000 yards away and coming on fast. But Tommy strips himself stark naked and shouts with glee as he dons clean vest, shirt, pants, socks, and what not. One man has an armful of clean towels, which he doles out to every man that passes. I gladly accept the offer of a pair of new socks, and a boon they prove, for my feet are already blistered and painful. And I love that idea. And what do you think they did to the alcohol in the naffy stores?
Oh, rubbed down their legs and things, where they were aching.
To ease the pain.
Now, the canteens also contained, as you say, copious amounts of alcohol, which added a temptation that across the ages the British soldier has rarely resisted.
Did you used to resist alcohol?
I resisted for a minute or two. And this is Private Edward Williamson
breaking
of the 17th...
strain of a Kit Kat.
Yes, 17th Royal Scots.
What did he say?
The columns suddenly came upon scattered units of the famous 51st Highland Division in groups of 10 or 12 with walking wounded among them. Very battle-stained, but in high humour, for they had evidently helped themselves to abandoned YMCA stores. They carried in their arms a varied assortment of articles: shirts, socks, pants, bottles of wine, tins of beer, cases of whisky, boxes of cigarettes and cigars. The officers were not immune either. Some of the Scots had drunk too much and gave voice to their favourite ditties as they ambled or staggered by. From their unwashed, weary faces and bedraggled kilts, it was obvious to our curious gaze that continuous fighting and lack of sleep had taken their toll. Hence no one could begrudge them this demonstration of elation now that tension was relaxed as they streamed down the hill from the vicinity of Hardecourt. Andy Swanson held a tall, lean Highlander who carried a Lewis gun over his left shoulder and a pile of cigarette tins under his right arm, with a fancy shawl under his tin hat which added a comic touch. "Where's the auction, Mac?" The Scot relieved himself of the gun for a moment and jerked his thumb over his shoulder. "Yon storeman told us to help ourselves before they fired the canteen, and we couldn't leave this loot to the bastard Germans."
Oh, yeah. Perfect then. Spot on. When the Germans broke through, there's quite a lot of panic in their rear areas, as you'd expect. This is part of this myth of the myth and reality of the German stormtroopers. They got a bit of a reputation for infiltration skills and the rest of it. And it's enhanced by rumour, isn't it? What would you say?
Yes.
Thank you for helping me out on that.
That's all right, mate. And this is what Major Neil Fraser Tytler of the 150th Brigade Royal Field Artillery, one of our favourites throughout the series, and this is what he says.
Huns, disguised as British officers on motorcycles, had got through into the back areas. They caused one or two serious panics by ordering villagers to clear out at once, shouting that the Hun cavalry was at hand. As may be imagined, when once a mass of motor lorries starts stampeding down a road, it's not the easiest matter in the world to check them, especially when the darkness is such that it may be felt. So, at several crossroads we posted pickets. Pickets. Yeah. Some staff officer asked one of my pickets what orders I had given them. The NCO replied, "The Major said we were just to shoot everybody making alarm or spreading despondency, and most particularly to shoot officers."
Well, they often spread despondency, don't they?
Did your officers spread despondency?
Well, leave it there. Now, during the chaos, there were also telling examples of the supposed national characteristics of both British soldiers and their Australian comrades. And this is what driver Roland Luther of C Battery, 92nd Brigade Royal Field Artillery said. "We found a girls' high school with beautiful beds, girls' clothes, wigs, paint and powder. A number of the men were putting on wigs, trying on the clothes, lying on the beds in their filthy, lousy clothes, and enjoying every minute of it. All at once, an Australian officer, who was drunk, dropped in on us. He shouted, 'Have you gone stark staring mad? Do you know that the Germans are only a quarter of a mile away in full force? Or are you just playing about, forgetting that there is a war on?' So saying, he fell, dead drunk, to the floor, and was collected by his servant."
I think the British dressing in drag and the Australians pissed out their heads just about sums up every cliche you could imagine there.
Now, perhaps the underlying spirit and sense of the ridiculous possessed by the British soldier is exemplified by this anecdote. And this is G.E. Morris, Royal Fusiliers.
Now, why didn't we put his name?
It's quite a common name, and there are a lot of people in the Royal Fusiliers.
Yeah, we couldn't track him down. This will be a story from the Cockney War Stories that we normally we could find the names, but we couldn't find him. Anyway, he says this. Little Ginger was the life and soul of our platoon until he was wounded on the Somme in 1918. As he was carried off to the dressing station, he waved his arm feebly over the side of the stretcher and whispered, "Don't tell Haig. He'd worry something shocking." And I just love that idea of don't tell Haig. He'd be all over.
He'd had enough bad news. Now, when Davy Rory was captured, he underwent the usual interrogation, which gave him a wonderful story to regale captive audiences long after the war.
Yeah, a lot of these stories are like this. And he was a colonel in the 1st 2nd Highland Field Ambulance, RAMC.
More perfunctory questioning, and we were conducted to what was possibly Corps headquarters, and then to the office of the Intelligence Department, where a long wait ensued. Fortunately, beside a nice stove. Then came the real questioning, and for this we were taken separately, I suppose to see if our answers tallied. The questions were put abruptly, not to say roughly, but there was no real impoliteness. Of course, every attempt was made to extract information, but on our denial there was no exhibition of frightfulness. Some amusement was caused by my refusal to give division, brigade, brigadier's name, etc., seeing that information was plastered over my uniform and helmet. When I refused the name of my brigadier, I was told, "He is Pelham Burn and he goes on leave next week." They knew more than I did.
Excellent. Now, the whole point about this is the Americans are coming. It's a race against them.
And they would make all the difference, providing a vast reservoir of manpower, inexperienced in Western Front warfare, but eager and able to learn.
Yeah, there's sometimes too much, not enough credit given to the speed with which the Americans learn things. They are brash. British are arrogant. The Americans are brash. You pays your money, you takes your choice, don't you?
Yeah, and certainly British and Americans were two nations divided by a common language. Some officers tried their best to cement the alliance in traditional fashion. Yes.
What can this mean?
Well, we're going to find out, because Captain Charles Potter of the 2nd 6th Lancashire Fusiliers tells us.
Aye. Generic Northerner. Aye. Working class lad. Aye. On arrival at mess, 3 good pegs were poured out and a suspicion of soda water added to each. The American drank with relish, settled down his glass and exclaimed, "Gee, but this sure is fine stuff." To which one of our hosts replied, at the same time showing him the bottle, I forgot what accent to him. "Yes, it's Haig, and Haig, Sir Douglas Haig's firm, you know." This brought the surprising rejoinder from the American. "My, you don't say. Reckon I always allowed he was some soldier, but I did not know he ran a saloon." That was dreadful.
Yeah, we're going to get complaints.
Bugger 'em.
Now, at the front, the Australians tried their best to teach the Americans...
What country?
The Australians tried their best to teach the Americans attached to them. There was a lot to learn, and a lot of men had died learning it.
Yeah, that's true.
Excuse me. And this is 2nd Lieutenant George Mitchell of the 48th Australian Battalion.
He was one of your favourites, wasn't he, from the book?
Some Yank officers had come up. I took one in hand and we walked to the right, where the higher land overlooked the Somme Valley. He was worried. "I don't know when to duck, Ozzy."
Is he American as well, or Australian?
The Australians relating the story.
Oh, right.
"You'll learn," I told him. Just then came the fearsome stock whip sound of a machine gun. The noise is terrific, but by some trick of sound, one is never under fire from that gun so heard. The Yank was on his tummy. "You don't get down for those," I yelled above the din. He got up with a puzzled expression. We walked on for a while, outlined stark on the skyline. There came the soft hiss of bullets close round us, each making less noise than a big mosquito. I got into a shell hole and looked up to see the Yank still standing and gazing around. "Come in, America," I said. "If you want to see much more of the war, this is where you do get down." He got in. It sure has me beat how you work it out. When the machine gunner's attention was turned elsewhere, we strolled on. With horrible suddenness, a whiz-bang arrived from the left and made a fan of flame on the bank below us. We both dropped and crawled into a handy length of trench. More shells came as we crouched, the hot breath of the smoke rolling over us. "There didn't seem any doubt about that lot," said the Yank. "No," I replied. "Your instincts were sound that time."
Yep, and overall, that sums it up. The Americans learned fast. And now, while we think about it, we'll show that we learn slowly by having a short break.
With the Americans on side, the counterattacks began in July 1918. It began a series of battles which forced the Germans back. Every one of the Allied nations played a crucial part.
Yeah, and particularly the French. We often talk about the 100 Days, but this is a French offensive we're talking about here, with everybody else pitching in.
The tide of war was turning though, but there was still the same dark humour, never better expressed than by an epitaph penned by some anonymous Australian on a recently dug German grave. And this is Second Lieutenant John Fleming of U Battery, 16th Brigade Royal Horse Artillery.
Some of the graves dotting a battlefield had inscriptions, often macabre, as in the case of one I saw, that of a German killed during an Australian advance. To the man's rifle had been pinned a sheet of cardboard on which was scrawled in chalk, "Here you lie, brava Boche. Your pals won't bury you. Hindenburg won't bury you. Your Kaiser won't bury you. They can't. But the bloody Aussie will bury you because you stink."
Yeah, he obviously had British parents, that one.
Yeah.
Now, as they passed over the disputed battlefields, there seemed to be a proliferation of amusing notices. And this is Lieutenant Colonel William Lowe of the 18th Durham Light Infantry.
We like the Durham Light Infantry.
Yeah, we do. You've written a book recently about the 16th
In the Second
DLI
World War.
in the Second World War. Called Foot Sloggers, should people wish to get it.
Yeah.
See what I did there?
I think it's so subtle, Gary. No one would have noticed it. But for us endlessly banging on about how subtle it was.
Now, this is Lieutenant Colonel William Lowe. There were several German dugouts with notice boards directing "Zum Unterstand," which means to the dugout. The wits among the transport at once chalked up underneath, "And some don't."
But so that's in a very serious book. It's in the history of the 18th DLI, which is not a funny book. And yet that's stuck in the middle of it.
Now, as the pace of the advance quickened, it was obvious that they were winning. But there were many different reactions to the approach of victory and peace at last. And this is Lance Corporal William Andrews of the 1st 4th Black Watch.
No, I'm not. A frightful gloom began to settle upon us all. I do not think that the men could have carried on much longer if they had not hoped that the end was near. The imagination seemed to be unable to look further forward than 3 months. It must be over then. I wrote in my diary, "Peace opinions at the front. Front line. Peace at any price, for God's sake." Or Christ's sake. Battalion headquarters. "Peace soon. Too good to be true. If only." Brigade headquarters. "Ah, well, we've had enough of this." Division headquarters. "Peace? Oh, not yet. We must have another smash at them first." Corps headquarters. "No peace, now or ever. Fight on like hell, damn you." The base. "Peace, likely? I hope to God it ain't true. This is good enough for me. It'll suit me for life." And there's some truth in that, would you not say?
Certainly, there was a resentment, shall we say, from frontline soldiers towards those behind the lines in the bases.
Bound to be.
Now, peace was coming.
But when, Gary? When?
The fighting continued, although on the British front it diminished in fervour after the Battle of the Sambre on the 4th of November.
Yeah, this is common sense and logistical necessity. Our friend Rob Thompson used to always point out that we couldn't have done much more at the end of the war. We were well, he used to use a scientific term, didn't he? Do you remember what it was, Gary?
Buggered.
Yes.
This is Lieutenant John Hills of the 5th Leicestershire Regiment. A certain company commander, picking up his box respirator, found that he had thrown it off into a patch of filth. Copious oaths followed, and he vowed that he would murder the next Boche he saw. Some half hour later, a cyclist patrol met us, escorting one undersized little prisoner, splay-footed and bespectacled. The company were delighted, and with one accord hailed their commander with cries of, "Now's your chance, sir!"
Oh, God. Now, at last the day comes, sir. What is that day?
The 11th of November, 1918.
It's the sort of focus of all our hopes and dreams, but for a lot it was a dreadful anticlimax. And this is a typical example. This is Gunner Ivar Hansen. No, Ivar Hansen, 311 Brigade, Royal Field Artillery. And he says this: rumours circulated that an armistice was to be signed at 11 a.m. A mounted officer proceeding up the line had broken the news to one of our men, but we still had our doubts. At about 11 a.m, we were ordered to fall in on the roadside at the farm entrance. We were given the "stand at ease" and "stand easy." Then Lieutenant Cork said to us casually, "Well, boys, I'm pleased to inform you that the bloody war is over." And that is just a definition of an anticlimax, isn't it? It's just, it's not big, it's not clever or anything, it's just the end of the war.
Now, behind the line, there was more opportunity to celebrate. And Frederick Noakes sums up the ecstatic mood neatly.
Now, he was a guardsman. We've talked about him in the past, but at this time he's in KO camp. I'm not quite sure where that is, but clearly that's all I could be bothered to
Is it a knockout, that camp?
Get on with the quote, you.
Suddenly, through the pandemonium, which always preceded lights out, could be heard the sound of distant cheering, apparently from the far side of the camp. At first, it was greeted with sarcastic laughter and a few ironical counter-cheers, but the sound increased, and presently the throbbing of a drum mingled with the shouting. At that, the noise in the hut was suddenly silenced. Men gazed at each other with eager, questioning eyes. "Can it be?" was the unspoken query. "It is!" And with a simultaneous movement, everybody huddled on their clothes and poured out on the parade ground. On all sides, the other huts were disgorging their occupants, and in a few minutes the huge open space was black with excited men. The rumour and the cheering spread like a conflagration. "Germany has surrendered!" And the whole 8,000 or 10,000 of us yelled ourselves hoarse. With one accord, the whole throng burst into unanimous song.
And what tune have you selected for this song?
"Take me back to dear old Blighty, put me on the train for London town, drop me over there, any blooming where, Birmingham, Leeds or Manchester, well, I don't care."
That was wonderful, wonderful.
Backwards and forwards we swayed, arms linked, shouting, cheering and singing. The uproar was indescribable, and it never occurred to us to doubt the truth of the rumour. I remember thinking, this is the happiest moment of my life. I must fix it in my memory forever.
Lovely, lovely. That's obviously the night before from the context. But would you say that the Great War, was it ever a war to end war?
Well, no.
No?
No. I mean, that was just a catchy slogan, wasn't it? The war to end all wars. But it was a belief that helped men to keep on going in extremis.
Yeah, yeah. The idea that all this dreadful pain and agony is a one-off and that somehow they're fighting for a better future. That their children might not have to suffer what they were undergoing. Yeah, I suppose so.
What was the gap between the wars? 20 years.
Yeah.
Do you think their children suffered?
Yes.
Now, fond hopes that would soon be disabused in the post-war years. And this is Lieutenant John Nettleson of the 2nd Rifle Brigade.
I vaguely remember him from my book on 1918. He's quite a miserable sort. He says this: "We were told this was the war to end war, and some of us at least believed it. It may sound extraordinarily naive, but I think one had to believe it. All the mud, blood and bestiality, a lot of that, only made sense on the assumption that it was the last time civilised man would ever have to suffer it. I could not believe that anyone who had been through it could ever allow it to happen again. I thought that the ordinary man on both sides would rise up as one and kick any politician in the teeth who even mentioned the possibility of war. Well, that's not happening.
Now, some thought the whole thing was a worldwide outburst of insanity, and this is Signaller Sidney Fuller of the 8th Suffolk Regiment.
Oh, I've not heard your Suffolk accent for a while.
The German prayer book found in the pillbox at Polkapelle, on the cover, Mit Jesus in der Welt, and inside a coloured picture of Christ looking with pity on a dead German soldier. The same picture as in our own field prayer book, with Jesus in the field. The only appreciable difference being in the uniform of the dead soldier, German in one, khaki in the other. And the feeling experienced on seeing that picture compared with one of our own, that the whole war was a horrible mistake.
Yeah, and after it was over, there was a great sort of, some of the more thoughtful men, they tried to sort of encapsulate their feelings, didn't they? And there was an outburst of memoirs, there was utterly boring pieces, there were songs, there were poems, a great burst of poetry. How would you describe the literature of the war?
Well, it was incredible. Almost every unit produced a history recounting their war.
Yeah.
Some a little more than a war diary, but others bring battalion characters back to life and are full of anecdotes.
Yeah, we loved them, and we used quite a few of them. War memoirs all over the place, hundreds of them, thousands of them, whatever you want, recording events from every possible point of view. And then there were the poets.
Yeah, bringing cultured sensibilities to bear on life and death in the trenches. Yet sometimes simplicity seems to pack more punch. And this is Private Frank Pope of the 10th King's Royal Rifle Corps. And we'll do this together.
What's this poem called?
History of the War.
Ooh.
So this will be really, really in-depth.
It will
and
be.
Meaningful. Ready, Pete?
I am.
A trench.
A stench. Some scraps of French.
Some horrible German vapours.
A shell.
A yell.
No more to tell.
Bar a paragraph in the papers.
I think we got...
That went well.
I thought we got it in the end.
But to return to our overarching theme...
What is our overarching
That's the
theme?
character of the British soldier at war. That is what this has all been about.
What, the podcasts? The book?
Podcast, the book.
What? Never mind, yeah. Do we think the British soldier's unique?
No, others have and perhaps will write the stories of soldiers of Germany, France, Russia, America and all the other nations that too many to list. But this work has been devoted to the British Tommy.
Yeah, that's the... You see, this is our story. And, sometimes you get things, why aren't we doing the Croatians? Well, because we don't speak Croatian and we're not from Croatia. We hope that the Croatians are recording their story. We hope that everybody's story is recorded properly. But this is the British Tommy. A bit of a cliche sometimes, comic cliche at times.
Yeah, but it's often possessed of incredible courage and stamina. And this is Private Edward Loxdale, the 15th London Regiment. That's the Civil Service Rifles, Pete.
Now, I've got someone in mind as I read this. His one privilege is to grouse. He was ease-loving and pleasure-seeking. Now he submits to the most rigorous discipline. His time is divided between soul-saddening drill and detestable trenches. His amusements are slating the army and strafing the enemy. He anathematizes the army wholeheartedly, root and branch from top to bottom, lock, stock and barrel. He criticizes its organisation, its methods and all its works. He is irreverent about red hats. That's staff, isn't it? Yeah. He is starved, sweated, insulted, fed up and far from home. He says the army is an ass. And if he had his time all over again, well, he'd join it again. How do you react to that? Because I am thinking of you.
I thought you was thinking of Mark Jackson. Oh,
your friend Mark Jackson.
Yeah, my friend Mark Jackson. Red hats are MPs.
Of course,
military police.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking of red tabs, wasn't I?
Red tabs, yeah. It's an easy mistake.
They would join it again. So what am I talking about?
Well, whatever people may think today, there's little doubt that for the most part, the British soldiers knew why they'd gone to war, and they genuinely believed that the Germans had to be stopped. There's much evidence to indicate that they were right as well, because although no country was entirely innocent in those days of imperial ambitions and rapacious capitalism,
The Germans were...
and they were in
tough.
France.
They were in France. They were in Belgium. They were aggressive. I think we do tread that line carefully.
Yes, I mean, it's much more complicated than that. But once they were, on the continent, could they be left in control of continental Europe?
No, they couldn't. I don't think they could. And given the time, it was going to lead to war. And it did. We're coming to the end of this massive podcast series. We're last chance to try and sell the book coming up. Gary, do you think we'll remember? What a final word. Come on, Gary, you're the eloquent one.
Well, maybe it's to consider that the awful conditions and of horrors of the Western Front gave the soldier little choice but to laugh or cry.
Laugh or... You are eloquent.
So over the course of these podcasts, we hope that you've joined them in their laughter. Perhaps now, upon quiet reflection of the reality of what you've heard.
You might shed a tear.
If you've enjoyed these podcasts, then please do look out for the book. It's published by Pen and Sword, and it's available at all good and some bad online book retailers.
Do they pay tax always?
Not all of them do. And it is available pretty much worldwide, certainly where our listeners are, although I'm not sure that the two in Russia can get it.
No. Well, bugger them.
Oh, well, there's none in Russia now.
Bye, Russian listeners. Now, do please buy the book. It's cheap as chips. Actually, it's not, but you can afford it. Think of me and Gary starving in our garrets, alone and sad.
You know what?
Garrets. That's what?
I thought you said garage.
No, garrets is where artistic people...
No, I'd rather starve in a garage.
Oh, well, I've got a garage.
Well,
Cheers, Gary.
Cheers, Pete.
Thanks for listening to the show.
Blah, blah, blah.
If you'd like to support us,
blah,
you can now buy us a coffee.
Blah,
Visit www.buymeacoffee.com/PGMH.
Or visit www.blah.
And we'd be jolly grateful.
Cheers.
I've never let anything slow me down, but when my doctor diagnosed me with non-muscle invasive bladder cancer, or NMIBC, carcinoma in situ, I'll be honest, it stopped me right in my tracks. After the standard BCG treatment wasn't working, I talked to my doctor about a non-surgical option called Anktiva. Anktiva is used with BCG and given directly into the bladder through a catheter. It's been shown to help certain adult patients like me achieve a durable, complete response up to 4 years. And now, I'm back to moving at the speed of life. So ask your doctor if Anktiva might be right for you.
Patients treated with Anktiva plus BCG may still be at risk for more serious muscle invasive or metastatic bladder cancer, which could be life-threatening if bladder removal is delayed. If you don't respond to a second round of Anktiva with BCG, bladder removal surgery should be considered. Before starting Anktiva, tell your doctor if you're pregnant or planning to become pregnant, as Anktiva may cause fetal harm. Common side effects include abnormal laboratory results, increased creatinine, painful urination, blood in urine, frequent urination, urgent need to urinate, urinary tract infections, high potassium, muscle pain, chills, and fever. For more information, visit Anktiva.com or call 1-877-ANKTIVA, 1-877-265-8482.
Thanks for listening. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook to learn more about each episode. And if you'd like to support the podcast, you have a couple of options. You can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/PGMH, or consider subscribing to the podcast for only £2 per month and get ad-free listening and bonus content. You can find links for both on our Facebook and Twitter accounts.
Sounds great, doesn't it?